right, so while we're here, let's look at the back of this amp. So, the back of the amp, we've got our two inputs. We've got XLR, which is a balanced input. Then we've got our 1/4" inputs, and we've got our RCA, which is unbalanced. So these 1/4" inputs can be used either as inputs or outputs. So you'll see it says link/out. So you can actually you can use them as an input. So if I was daisy chaining another amp, I could use it as an output down to another one, or I could actually use it as an input coming off a mixer. So those are the inputs. The cool thing about this amp, we don't really use it, but it's a good feature, is there, we'll get into it in a sec. Is it on the next video? I think it might be on the next video. You can actually select the voltage input on this amp. So it comes normal, in a normal mode, but there's a high mode that actually selects the impedance for these RCAs. So that, say you had like an iPhone or something, and you know, an RCA cable, you could actually plug into here without a mixer, without damaging it. Typically you can't do that on most amps, but this guy from the front panel, you can actually set that setting. So there's three ways that this guy operates here. So you've got your normal stereo mode, which you have, you know, channel 1, channel 2. Then we have what's called a parallel mode, and we can do this all from the front panel. We have a parallel mode, and what parallel mode does is takes the input to channel 1 and sends the same thing, or the input to channel 1, and sends that same signal out of channel 1 and channel 2. So a lot of times in the past, you know, we've done things like this and use a Y cable to where we have one feed coming in that's going to feed both inputs and send it out both outputs. That is an option. Or we can switch it on the front, send it to parallel, so that one input could come in, and from both channels we'd be sending just that one feed out.
Does parallel mode actually make it a parallel circuit which will have the resistance of what's going out, or is it still just, does it just clone?
It clones it, yeah, exactly, yep. So it just takes whatever signal's coming in A, yeah, and it'll send it out B's output as
So it's
well.
not parallel wiring, it's
Yeah,
just...
yeah. And the third one is what's called bridge mode. So bridge mode, let me go back. You can see that bridge mode basically triples the wattage of, you know, what one side of your speakers are going to be. So if we're running at 8 ohms on this amp, it's at 215 watts. If we're at 8 ohms bridged, you know, it's over 3 times the amount at 700 watts. So usually when we use bridge mode, a lot of times for subwoofers, some subwoofers are pretty powerful. So sometimes we'd use a bridge mode to power like a 1,000-watt sub, you know, rather than using 2 channels. So if we needed 1,000 watts, we would use it in bridge mode. So bridge mode, you know, instead of using positive and negative, you can read the back of the layout and it'll say negative and positive. So you're just using one pair in bridge mode to gain much more wattage out of that. So out of this guy, you know, we've got a few different connections. We have what you can just take your normal speaker wire, shove them in the top, screw it down. That's one option. Then we have banana plugs. And banana plugs actually go right in the middle, and then you can screw them down, tighten it up, and lock it in there. And the way that works is inside, you can get a little tweaker or screwdriver, shove your wire in these 2 holes, take the tweaker to tighten it down, and then that will go back in the amp. The other option is what's called the speak-on connector. This is what the speak-on looks like, and it kind of snaps and locks in place there. So in most professional, you know, any live sound setting, you know, this is typically the connection that you'll see go into like stage speakers, something like this. If you pull it out and twist it, it'll come out. So on this connector, you'll see it'll say pin 1 positive, pin 1 negative, for channel 2. And then channel 1, it'll say pin 1 positive, pin 1 negative, and then 2 positive, 2 negative. So what this is describing is what the pins are on this connection for the wire. So these connectors come in 2-pin modes and in 4-pin modes. So if you're using a 2-pin mode, you could just connect it to a normal channel, and it'll just pass a positive and a negative signal to your speaker. If we were going to go into bridge mode, you see how bridge mode here, we'd see that it's positive or negative from channel 2, positive from channel 1. This description down here basically tells you the same thing. So if we had a 4-pin speak-on connector, we could wire it to the hot of number 1, the negative of number 2, and plug it into channel 1, and that would give us our bridge mode. But that's the only way to give us bridge mode with a speak-on connector, rather than using a banana clip or the other things.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So did you say having a 4-pin neutral connector is the only way to get that bridge, or is
The
there
only way to
wiring as well?
The only way to get the bridge with the speak-on connector
Is with the 4.
is with a 4-pin. Yeah. Yep.
And for standardization sake, which way do you envision us going forward wiring? Using the banana clips or bare wire? What's the best route for us to take?
Well, most of our amps don't have this. I mean, these really are the only models that we use that have this kind of connection. I mean, this guy, the TOA, some of the other ones we use really don't have this. So, I mean, from what we've been doing, wiring it in, and actually screwing it down has worked, just because that makes sense with all the other amps. I do like these connectors, and they're they lock in, super tight. That thing's never come apart. I would like to use these on situations like this, which I guess we can talk more in depth about, if that's something we want to do and transition to. I'm not a huge fan of the banana clips. What's nice about them is they're so quick. Did I bring 2? They're so quick and easy. If you had 2 pairs of speakers, they literally just snap right into the back of each other. Instead of splicing, rewiring, it is super easy that way. But, typically we've always run them into here. But, yeah, we can talk more in depth about using these guys. It's pricier, but, I'm alright with that. Alright, the other thing on the back of the amp, which we haven't used yet, but we might, it kind of makes sense, is we've got a Phoenix connector here that we can send sleep and power commands to. So from an external control system, we can tell this amp when to sleep, go into sleep mode, and when to turn on. So the other thing that's cool about this amp is from the main menu. If you hold down the menu and select button, did I print this? Yeah, I did print it. If you hold down the menu and select button, you can get to. That's not it. That's not it. Okay, maybe I didn't print it out. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, if you hold down the menu and select button to get to the main menu, you can turn the lights off on these guys. You can see how kind of the blue light on both sides light up pretty bright. In here, you can tell it to turn off the lights. You can also tell it to go into a sleep mode, to where it will dim the lights. So say there's no activity on this guy, you can set it for 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 5 minutes. Sometimes in situations, if we've got a rack of these, amps and they're super bright, people might not want that, depending on where the amps are located, in the room. You can actually turn the lights off, or tell it when to sleep and basically dim the lights. And this is also where you would activate this control if we end up, using this control system in the back. And then you've got your typical kind of standard connections or knobs on the front. You've got your gain for channel 1 and 2. Thermal is, if it goes into thermal mode, that's when you're beyond clip mode. You're kind of above clip mode, and you'll actually hear the amp start to kind of cut out internally. So anytime you're up in the red like that, you want to make sure that you back down your input. The other cool thing about this amp is it has a low pass filter and a high pass filter, and it has a crossover in it. So you could literally use this one amp. Say you had a system where you had a subwoofer and a speaker. You could use channel 1 for a subwoofer, by activating the different low pass and high pass filters and the crossover, and channel 2 for the high. And internally in the amp, without a drive rack, without an external crossover, without any of that stuff, you can do it all from within the amp to be able to, to select that stuff. Let me just look at the back here while we're on it. All right, so this is the stuff we just talked about. You've got your balanced XLRs, the 1/4 inch, the speak-on connectors, your aux to tell it when to go to sleep, fans, your binding posts, kind of everything we just talked about.
Yeah, excuse me, Justin, that aux connector
Mhm.
for sleep mode, that's a contact closure
Mhm.
relay, essentially we're connecting it to a relay.
Yep. Yeah, right here. Aux connector allows sleep mode with a contact closure between pins 1 and 2. Amp status signal is available at pin 3 because it sends a command back
Right.
to give you feedback to tell you what state it's in, whether it's awake or sleep. So, yeah, that could be useful for us rather than having to power down the whole system
Right. So
or
I was
whatever.
thinking of
Yeah.
which is mine, yeah.
Yeah, just to tell the amp, basically to go to sleep, when to wake it up.